Last night, I was watching Bloomberg and I saw a little discussion, and the discussion was called, "Why hasn't the US recession happened yet?" And it was talking about the US yield curve in terms of the 10-year versus the 2-year. And we talked about this last year, and we talked about the using yield curves to forecast. And what we observed at that time was that using the 2s and 10s has a pretty reliable record of forecasting recessions that never happen. And this is particularly true in the 80s and the 90s. And that the Fed itself preferred to use a different measure of the yield curve, which was the difference between the 10 years and 90-day treasuries. So the yield curve that we show and the yield curve we use to as a forwarding indicator of the US economy is the 90 days and the 10 years. And so rather than say the recession isn't going to happen, I'm going to take the guidance now of the blue chip consensus, which is the most highly rated forecasting outfits in the US, and tell you that the US recession has arrived and it's happening right now. And this is as bad as it gets. What we understand is the blue chip consensus forecasts that there will be negative GDP this quarter, negative about 1.5%, negative next quarter by just under 1%, therefore giving you your US recession, and then moving to slight positive growth in the third quarter, and really returning to trend growth, pretty strong growth in the fourth quarter. Now, why that's happening and how indicators that we can use to check is a recession going to happen? Yes, we can see in our 90-day versus 10-year yield that it's strongly negative. What that negativity means is you expect a fall in investment in the US economy. And that's certainly happening, and it's been happening in the housing sector. Housing construction has been contracting from the middle of last year. Contracted in the third quarter, the fourth quarter, expected to contract significantly in the US this quarter and next quarter, but probably finds a bottom somewhere in the third quarter and is slightly positive in the fourth quarter. The other indicator that we talked about last year a lot, as well as this version of the yield curve, was the Chicago Fed National Activity Indicator. Chicago Fed National Activity Indicator is now minus 0.3 in its most recent measure. It has to go down to minus 0.7 to generate a real tough recession, but we expect it to continue to decline this quarter and next quarter to about minus 0.5, showing a shallow recession, which is what seems to be occurring in the US economy. Why is the recession expected to be so shallow in the US? Is that the basic driver of the US economy is moving from the housing sector to the oil and gas sector. In some previous recessions, this decline in housing activity has been so strong that it's kept the US economy weak for far more than 2 quarters. But what starts to happen in the second half of this year, we get an enormous expansion in the oil and gas sector in the US. Oil and gas sector should start to grow around about 40% annualized. Very rapid growth in the final quarter of this year and, the third quarter of this year and the fourth quarter of this year. And it's a combination of that strong growth in the oil and gas sector at the same time as housing stops declining that gives you your positive number in the final quarter of this year, and strong and really quite good positive numbers as we move into next year. So why hasn't the US recession happened yet? Well, in fact, it is happening. We have negative US growth, expected to have negative US growth this quarter and next quarter. But we come out of it pretty rapidly, and we come out of it pretty rapidly because of very strong demand for oil and gas and the very powerful recovery of activity in the US oil and gas sector in the final half of this year, in the first half of next year.